future is now.
Hi, everyone. Cheryl Cran here, our next episode for Next Now podcast. Here we are. And I want to talk about something that came out of a recent event I was doing. I was in Indian Wells, California, speaking for a major energy group. And I did a keynote on, leading the hybrid workplace, the future is human. And then followed that up. I was part of a panel in the afternoon with two other technologists within the organization. And we were talking about people first technology. What does that really mean? What does it mean for business? And so it was a really dynamic day talking about future is human, leadership, future of all things. What does it mean? The future of society. What does future of human mean? So it was very, of course, fascinating and lots of interaction and questions from people attending both those sessions. At the panel session, it was fascinating to me because three people, without hearing the other person ask the question just kept getting repeated, was, how do you maintain culture in a hybrid workplace? Now, the reason I found it fascinating is they didn't hear each other ask it. And so to me, when somebody asks the same question three times, obviously it's an issue. At Next Mapping, we've done tons of research on future of work, future of society, future of human. And the culture question comes up a lot in our consulting work, in our coaching work, in these presentations that I do both virtually and in person. And I'm going to be just real straight here because that's how I roll. And those of you that listen to me know that's how I roll. And the truth is, when that question comes up, how do we maintain culture in a hybrid? There's always subterfuge and there's always something else underneath that question. And really, when people are asking it, what they're really asking is, how do we get everybody back into the office so that we can have the culture of the good old days, or we can control culture because everybody's there in person? Now, you may disagree with me. That's cool if you do. But that's what I have found to be the common subterfuge under that question. So, of course, when it got asked, I addressed it and said, we need to reframe that question. So rather than say, how do we maintain culture that we had before in hybrid, the new question, the reframed question needs to be, how do we create a culture where every single worker, leader, team member, everyone within the organization has embodied mission, vision, values, and purpose of the organization, so that no matter where he or she or they work, culture is integrated into what they do every single day. Now, notice the difference in those questions, because if I ask, well, how do I maintain culture? We're actually trying to force change. We're trying to do that change management. How do I, lay over something that used to work versus really what's our current reality? And then how do we shift to the current reality? Change management, pushing back against what is, trying to make things the way they were before. Change leadership, creating new and creative solutions, asking different questions, looking at patterns in order to establish a new way of doing things. So if we go with that question, how do we embed mission, vision, values, purpose in every single worker? That now brings a higher level of responsibility and onus on every single individual within the organization. And dare I say, primarily on the CEO, the C-suite, the executive team. Because in the past, pre-pandemic, when it was an employer's market, leaders and teams could say, well, this is the workplace. This is our in-person culture. This is how you need to fit into that culture. Fast forward to the pandemic, and now we're firmly almost post-pandemic. And what you have is a societal shift that happened so rapidly and systemically changed everybody's lives, that now to say to someone, well, our culture was this, and we need you to remember that culture. We now need to inclusively bring everybody into a newly created culture based on hybrid. So if that means that your hybrid model is everyone has to be in person in the office 1 day a week or 2 days a week or whatever it is for your organization, it means that we have to now start dialoguing about culture, not as a concept, but as a daily action. Like, what are we doing on a daily basis to really elevate our culture and what it is? I had a client a few months ago in the insurance industry, and pre-pandemic had bought a lot of additional real estate, US-based company. And they had bought a lot of additional real estate. And so they were really concerned about the pandemic because it meant everybody was working virtually. They weren't using the space that they had just invested in. And we're talking major space within 3 major cities in the US. And so a lot of their questions were around protecting that in-office reality. I get it. You know what? Dollars and cents, real estate costs, it's all part of running business. However, what I pointed out to this group of senior leaders is if we're trying to protect an investment as our strategy, we're actually going to ignore people's behaviors versus trying to protect an investment or protect a way of doing things. So their question was, how do we maintain culture in hybrid? Their way of doing hybrid was they do want people back in the office primarily 3 days a week. That backfired on them in that they got pushback from their workers saying, no, we'd like to go to hybrid options 1, 2, or 3 days, depending on the individual's preferences. So really culture, if we break it down, the definition of culture is groupthink. You know, what does a particular group of people believe? How do they behave? So if we look at that from a higher level psychological impact, we can say, well, for example, in this insurance company, they prided themselves in being a culture that was about creating solutions. So that tenet of culture, creating solutions, transcends location. You don't have to be in office to be good at that. You can be anywhere. So then from there, if we break it down, it's like, oh, wait a second. Have we invested time, training, coaching in helping people be more creative with their solutions? So there's an opportunity to communicate the underlying meanings of what our culture is and to get really clear on the patterns of where is our culture successful in the past? How has it been successful through the pandemic and where we are now? And then how do we get every worker to embody the behaviors that best reflect the culture that we're wanting to recreate as a result of hybrid? Now, I know for some of you listening, you're going, that's a big job, Cheryl. Like, how do we even begin? And it is sort of, using that metaphor of turning a big ship. It is really like that. However, if we look at all future of work changes, which is, increase in remote work, increase in virtual work, distributed work, AI and technology as our coworker, if we look at all those changes and look at culture as another, I would say, zone of opportunity, then we can tackle it not from a how do we overlay what we used to do and make it work in hybrid, because that's not going to work. Rather, how do we get creative about embedding culture? Now, by the way, we can leverage technology for this. We can leverage Slack. We can leverage our intranets. We can leverage the way we deliver training. And for example, today, I just got off a conference call where typical HR within an organization has all the tools, but it's getting people to go and use the tools that is always the roadblock. And the reason for that is people are busy. People have multiple things on the go. They're not going to think to take an extra action to go into a portal to learn something. So an example of embedding culture is you want to have push solutions, not pull solutions. Pull solutions means you're asking me to take an extra action to go in to learn something. A push solution is I'm sending something to your mobile device every day that says, hey, when it comes to culture, think about this, 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 and this. And that's what we call micro learning. And that's what we call micro moments, which are far more effective in a hybrid environment. And it's a different way of applying learning and applying that embedded culture and mindset change that we want to create for people. So technology can definitely be leveraged for this. And what we find at Next Mapping is we have created micro-learning solutions for organizations to help embed this imperative. So the thing about culture is it's not something you snap your fingers and you say, okay, we've embedded a cultural mindset into hybrid. No. It's part of your overall leadership development, upskilling, reskilling, helping your workers to understand what culture means for your organization. And so really looking at it through the lens of personal responsibility and adding it to that for your workers, but not in a way that's burdensome or adding more work to them. It becomes an organic part of how we're delivering micro moments, and culture is part of that micro moment opportunity. So circling back to this event where I was on the panel and the question came up, it was fascinating to see people's responses to my response because all of a sudden you had them going, oh, Well, I thought it was easier than that. I thought I could just, you'd give me a magic answer that would say, well, you can just take everything you did here in person with culture and you can overlay it onto hybrid. The truth is, if you look at the patterns of what worked in culture pre-pandemic, and then look at the patterns of what's working within the virtual when we all had to go virtual throughout the pandemic, and then look at, okay, what does our hybrid culture going to look like moving forward? And then how do we embed that individual connection to culture? That's the biggest opportunity with this question. By the end of it, the three people who asked the question came up to me afterwards and they said, you know what, as you were saying it, it made perfect sense. And the reason I reacted, this was their response. The reason I reacted the way I did is it sounds like a lot of work. The truth is it is. So with hybrid, it's all about how do we leverage and engage everyone versus making it something that one or two people do or talk about. Because it's in leveraging everyone that we're going to win at the future of work, because that is that collaboration component. So if your culture is about collaboration, we are in the zone now in 2022 and beyond, where true collaboration is distributed power throughout the organization. And distributed power means distributed knowledge, distributed responsibility, distributed engagement. So I hope with this podcast, I've given you something to think about when it comes to culture. And rather than ask the question, how do we transfer the culture that we had in office pre-pandemic to a hybrid workplace? The new question is, how do we embed the mission, vision, values, the purpose of our organization into the minds of every single one of our workers as a daily reminder so that it is being exhibited, culture becomes innate in their daily behaviors. Something to think about. Thanks for being here for the Next Now episode. Wishing you all the best. And if you have any questions or want to interact on these topics, please social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, or email me directly, Cheryl@nextmapping.com. See you and talk to you soon.